Yeah. And so I think like my stress level is not great because I do like stuff like on TikTok or Twitter and stuff as well with like mental health and stuff. But if I get one negative comment, I literally want to retreat to bed and start crying my eyes out. I'm like, oh my God, I'm a terrible person.
Right. Well, you have to not read them. You have to not look at any of those comments. But yeah, you're right. People will say one negative thing and you will run with it. You know, I think Shannon Doherty, not to go back to her, I love her, but she always said, you know, the people who are happy in their lives, they don't really take the time out to say these negative comments. The people who need to get a life are the ones who are stopping and saying these negative things. Like, if you look at the overall picture, your YouTube video or your Twitch video or your Vine video will probably have that 85 to 90% likes. And that one negative comment will pull you in. I think the thing about negative comments is they make us stop. With positive comments, we always run towards the positivity. We always want to keep going with making videos. We always want to keep going with that. And negativity, whether that's when you're making a video or whatever else, will make us stop, right? That's why it's so effective when, or it was so effective when Donald Trump was like, vaccines can cause autism, right? Even the most knowledgeable people, even the scientists, even the moms would stop, right, and pause. It wouldn't change their views. They still might get the vaccine for their kids, but in that moment they would pause, they would stop, because that negativity would just cause them that block. So I think it's also realizing that about yourself. And we were talking about, you know, kind of checking yourself and checking your feelings and your emotions. I think to add on to that, checking when something negative has happened and saying, you know, that's just a normal reaction.
Yeah, well, I mean, so like with the like mental health advocacy, I do, you know, I kind of talk about mental illness, my experience of being bullied, abused, like relationships and everything. Just a bit of background, like I've cut off my family because abusive stuff, and they kind of found out I was talking about my stuff, about the stuff that like they've done, and they've started leaving horrible comments. Then I blocked them. They started making anonymous accounts to try and find out stuff, or leaving threatening or intimidating comments. For me, I think it's hard, because when it's people you know, you do start to, especially when it is people that have abused you or just have some personal vendetta against you, you do question it. You think, oh, well, maybe it didn't happen. Oh, maybe I am playing the victim or whatever, because they're not going to take that accountability. For me, like, I think I've recognized, you know, at the end of the day, they didn't give two shits about me like a year ago, but now all of a sudden they want to know every single thing I'm doing.
Do you think it's a control piece too? I mean, there seems to be that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's usually what happens with the scapegoat. If they do try and leave or they do try calling things out, is that like the rest of the family will try and kind of control the narrative. Like, oh no, they're the problem. Let's you know, accuse this person, because the abusive members, they're losing control. So they're trying to get that control back, or they're losing control of the narrative that they spun for so long. Because I think, you know, a lot of people be like, oh, well, because I think this is the thing, I try and kind of, when it's other people's family systems, for example, if somebody's like, oh yeah, none of us talk to this person, I'm like, okay, why? Because it can't be that the rest of you have never done anything. And that's often what it is like with the scapegoat. The scapegoat becomes the kind of emotional punching bag for everyone else's issues, and also like holding them to unrealistic expectations. And so I think people like that they try and get you to react like unhinged or crazy, because then they have ammunition to prove their point, to be like, oh, see, this person does kick up a fuss, or they are overreactive, they are sensitive, but they're trying to get that out of you. I think it's really hard. I think that, like, going back to saying about kind of this like mental health awareness thing on social media is performative, because people are all about that, but then they'll leave these horrible comments knowing it will have an impact on somebody.
Well, it's good to leave social media. I mean, sorry not to interrupt, but I left. I'm gone. I don't want it. I made the YouTube channel. If someone does poke you and you act like a bear and you're like, "Rawr," then they're like, oh, see, whoa, crazy. So you kind of have to be a little smart. And I think going back to where we what we had talked about earlier is like, if you don't know what to do, do nothing, just shut up. And silence is golden, and just kind of step away. And it's hard, especially if you're like at work and let's say someone yells at you and you're like, I think you can still take a moment to step back and just not react. I think that's really smart.
And I think it goes back to that kind of, again, like this like thing of personal responsibility. So if somebody at work is yelling at you, you're like, okay, I'm responsible for how I react to this, so I'm going to walk away or whatever. If they don't like that, that's on them.
Right.
Or if they're going to start shouting at me as I walk away, again, that's on them. That's got nothing to do with you. Or even, again, like doing nothing. Like, again, when I started getting these kind of anonymous comments and stuff, my initial thought is, right, I'm going to go to their house, have it out with them. But it's taken that moment to be like, no, again, that they're wanting this reaction.
And it's not worth it.
No, and I think, you know, luckily, again, like my partner's been able to stop me, because I think, again, like being quite dysregulated, and it's quick for me to go to this kind of dysregulated space. That's the issue. So like again, smallest comment, then I'm like, right, again, I'll either want to fight and be like, okay, have it out with this person, or it'll be like a freeze thing or fawning, being like, I'll profusely apologize, and then they kind of get what they want again, because I'm apologizing for something I haven't done.
Right.
Or even something they've done. I think it's hard, I think, especially with family, because you know that's who you've grown up with.
To walk away from that, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you know, and I think this is the thing I've noticed, that like some people, they don't like that I've walked away because they've had to step up with certain stuff. It means that their life is now inconvenienced or whatever. Because I think what would happen would be that like they'd always call me like pathetic and stupid that I couldn't do anything, but they'd also moan that I didn't do the things they said I couldn't do. So then I'd try and do it, but then it wasn't good enough. So I think I got this mindset of, well, I'd rather kind of get criticized for not doing it than having tried and getting criticized for me trying.
Because then you'll have wasted time. You'll be wasting double duty time, yeah.
But then they're like, oh, you're just being lazy, or you don't want to do anything. And I'm like, but none of you have offered to actually sit down and talk to me about what's going on. You're just quick to put the blame on me rather than figuring it out. And again, a bit like you said, you know, like every time you try, it feels like it's getting worse. Sometimes I think it is cultivating who you do have around you. Because I think the other thing with like abusive family dynamics or being a scapegoat, you learn what's familiar. So also you go towards friendships or relationships that are familiar to what your family is like. And I had that with friends, I had that with partners where I don't know whether it's something about me that says that like they can talk down to me, but I always had people that would be like, oh yeah, well, you are ugly, oh well, people treat you like crap because of blah blah, or it was always things on their terms, and if I spoke up for myself, I'd get shut down. And I think it took my breakdown and COVID, to be honest, I think, and like walking away to be able to really stand my ground with stuff. I think, yeah, it's paying. I think the other thing is, I think in terms of boundaries and stuff, if somebody is so used to you not having boundaries, they're not going to like that you have them. And so then that's when they start kind of calling you like full of yourself, or, you know, oh, you're just being arrogant, or you're being difficult. And like, no, or yes, I'm being difficult, but I'm being difficult to manipulate them, to do everything at the drop of a hat for you. I think some people like that control, so when that's taken away, they will, of course, they're going to get their backs up. You know, in terms of stress, that gets really stressful when your boundaries are constantly being walked over, or people expect you to have no boundaries. And I think that's the thing. I think I was always like quite a yes person, or do everything for everyone else. But then if I did start putting myself first, I'd then be called selfish, because like they're not used to that. I think these days I'm like, my mental health is just as important. My life is just as important. It's such a hard thing to navigate when this thing, like what I really struggle with is like with, especially like around therapy or the mental health world, is that loads of people do have different opinions. And because I try so hard not to upset anyone, I'm like, okay, I'll agree with them so I don't upset them, but I'll agree with them so I don't upset them. And then it will kind of look like I'm being like two-faced or fake or whatever. And I'm like, actually, no, I just don't want to hurt anyone. So I just won't have any opinion of my own. And I'll just stick to everyone else's because that feels safer, because then people aren't shouting at me. But again, that's what will happen if it's like somebody leaves a negative comment about a video I've done. I'm like, okay, I'll delete it because they're upset.
Do you delete it? I keep them. I respond in positivity because I feel like you are not judged by what happens to you. You're judged by how you respond. That's kind of why it's important when, I mean, you know, sometimes things can get out of control and you can very directly say, hey, this needs to stop. Or you can, I mean, you can advocate for yourself. You don't need to flip a table to do it, but you can be direct sometimes and you can say like, hey, look, I'm gonna set these boundaries. But if you have kind of these minuscule little moment interactions, I almost take them as challenges. I mean, you can flip the switch and you can